to me, improvement is fun. Getting better at something is my fun. Other people may not be able to relate to that, but that is truly like my take of fun is getting better at what we're actually trying to do, accomplishing the mission, so to speak. So if I'm investing my time into something, just because it's a hobby doesn't mean I have to suck at it. Come up with your goals and the vision that you want for your own dogs and how you want to hunt, and then maintain that standard. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of GDIY presented by Standing Stone Supply. Catching up with me this week is my good buddy Scott Kinnane. Scott, how you doing this morning?
Living the dream, as Nick says.
As always. So a little backstory going into this episode, throughout the years of doing this podcast and getting to meet so many listeners and Patreon patrons and I've had the privilege of developing certain relationships and friendships through people that have followed the show, and Scott is one of those guys that whether it's this incessant barraging and clarification questions or providing his feedback or thoughts, for better or worse, we've kind of developed a nice relationship and friendship over the years, especially this past year specifically. You kicked off the year really in a lot of ways with the traveling episode we did, which got a lot of good responses. And then just kind of linking up through Pheasant Fest and then a few shared nights in camp out in Idaho and Utah and stuff like that. We've kind of had a number of conversations to where we would be talking about a subject that Scott would say, I want more details on that. I want to know a little bit more about that. So he suggested compiling a list of questions or just subject matter that I honestly have no idea what he's going to ask me on. So this might be a fun episode or it might be a cluster. We'll see. But Scott, I hope you're ready to grill me. I still have no idea what you're going to ask me on this episode. So I don't know. We'll just have fun with it, I guess.
Absolutely. I've been pretty secretive. You've tried a couple of times to get some information out, even when you stop by here in Minnesota to get your dog, taken care of. But I have to be honest to your audience. I often wonder when I listen to you talk and the interviews that you do, how does he go down the path that he's going down? Why is he asking those types of questions? I don't know much about you. And I've told you this before. A lot of the podcasters that we listen to, we know their background. We know where they come from. We got a good idea, why they ask what they ask and why they bring on the interviewers that they bring on. So this is my opportunity to understand you better and where you're coming from and how you got here and where you see yourself going. And I think that'll help not just me, but your audience understand, more about Nick. How's that sound? There's my intrigue.
You're right. Yeah. It'll be interesting. You've brought up this suggestion or idea a few times, and finally after the last time I think we were in Idaho and I can't remember what we were talking about, but I said something and you're like, you know what, we need to talk about this on an actual episode at some point. And at first, as I was pretty hesitant to do it, especially as it's like, this is a very topic driven style podcast. Every episode kind of has its theme in of itself. But every now and then you got to change things up and have some fun. And so when you kind of brought up the idea in Idaho again, I asked a couple other buddies that I've recently shared camp with and just kind of bounce the idea off of them if they thought that this might be fun, and they're like, absolutely, let them grill you, let them torch you, play stump the chump, so to speak. But I have no idea what you're going to ask. I have no idea like how far back you're wanting to go or if you're just trying to get my opinion on things. But either way, we're going to let it rip and just kind of see where we land on this, and just try and have some fun with it.
Perfect. I love it.
So I don't know. Did you, again? You've been kind of compiling these questions. Is there a format or a way that you were personally kind of thinking of handling this, or were we just going to kind of have one of our little coffee talks that we had in Idaho and let it go?
Yeah, a little bit of both, right? I'd like to start. I have, you know me, I'm very analytical, data driven. So I've got my group over here that I've got to ask, and I know for sure that I'm going to ask for your opinion on things, right? You're very good at not giving your opinion, right? I forced you into it when we did the one on the dog traveling. I'm going to force you into it again, right? So you're going to get those comments that are going to go, oh, but I think that's good. I think that involves your audience better. So it's going to go both ways.
All right.
Let me know when you're ready.
Hey, let it rip. Let's just jump on in and see where we go.
Take a deep breath.
Let
All
her
right.
rip, Scott.
Let's start with little Nicky. All
Little
right.
Nicky.
Little Nicky. Where the heck did little Nicky come from? Where's he been? What were his influences when he was little? What was life like in Nicky's house? Were there dogs? Was there hunting? Was there shotguns? I know nothing about when you grew up and how you got here.
Well, the short answer in the hunting background is there was none of it growing up. I was born and raised in the city of Memphis, Tennessee, and I had two siblings. I was the middle child, and so we played a lot of competitive sports, all three of us. And if anybody that's listening to this that has kids involved in competitive sports, especially not just rec league or church league, not that there's anything wrong with that, but when you play competitive sports, it is a year-round type of situation, especially when you're playing multiple sports, which all three of us did. And so when you have three children in the household and only two parents, and all three kids are playing competitive sports, that doesn't leave a whole lot of room for outside hobbies. That's not just a quick in and out type of thing. So I grew up fishing a lot. My dad still made time to take me fishing in the morning, and it kind of preceded a lot of practices or games, whatever was on the schedule that weekend. So we would get up early, go fishing for a little bit, then I would go hit the ball field. But to answer your question on the hunting, like I always had an interest in it, but I just never had the opportunity. I never had the exposure, but there was just something in the back of my head. I got hooked on fishing, no pun intended. Uh, but I loved it so much to where I was the typical high school kid ditching class just to go out for an hour or two to go fishing, right? And but that something in the back of my head, I was always interested in the hunting aspect, and I didn't really know what in what degree or direction in hunting. I didn't know if it was big game. I didn't know if it was upland or waterfowl, whatever. And so really that didn't come till much later when I was out on my own and left the nest, so to speak, when I could actually go and do hunter safety course on my own. And so it was one of those things to where growing up, my favorite book, along with a lot of other kids growing up that has an interest in the outdoors, was Where the Red Fern Grows. And
Yeah.
so I had to read that. I think I was around 7 years old or something, and I just the binding on the book was gone. I just reread it over and over and over again to where a very impressionable boy reading that at 7, 8 years old, all of a sudden it's my life's goal to have a red bone coonhound. And it's just, and that stuck with me for years. And so when I went and I had to pay for college somehow. My arm kind of let out a little bit. I didn't get a chance to go and play ball in college like kind of was always the plan growing up, and so I had to pay for college somehow. So I went and joined the Army Reserves, and when I got back from boot camp and the job training AIT, the first thing that I did was go buy me a red bone coonhound pup, and
Nice,
and
nice.
and and that was what motivated me to go get hunter safety done, get my hunting license, and really start trying to figure out what coon hunting was, because I didn't have the mentors. I didn't have anybody that I could even bounce ideas off of. I just bought a puppy and I had no idea what I'm doing, and right or wrong or indifferent, like I just went out and did it to the best of my ability. Hindsight's always 2020. Looking back on it, I did a lot of irrelevant stuff. Like it wasn't wrong per se, but it didn't really help or do anything. And so I say I wasted. It cultivated a lot of interest and intrigue in the outdoors in me. So it wasn't a waste of time, but figuring it out, like I wasn't actually going to become a good coon hunter the way I was doing it, right? And then a year or two into it, where I was kind of every now and then finding success, we'd tree a coon, and here or there, my dog ended up being more interested in possums than coons. I realized I appreciate sleep a lot more than what I previously thought of. And so, coon hunting, I've talked on numerous episodes, houndsmen are just a different breed. They just are. I don't think that they require sleep like the rest of us. At the very least, they ignore that requirement in life of sleep. So I started looking elsewhere, and I had a lifelong buddy who was a real big duck hunter and waterfowler. And he eventually invited me to go on a duck hunt with him. And through going on some duck hunts with him, I really liked duck hunting. It was a lot of fun, but I found myself more intrigued and interested in the dog aspect of duck hunting than the actual duck hunting, if that's fair to say.
Yeah.
And so just through that, I was all constantly asking him a million questions about dogs. And then it was actually, believe it or not, Ron Bame's hunting dog podcast. When I finally, eventually years later, got to put my feet down and stop moving around and grow up and get a big boy job. I was sitting in a cubicle, and it was miserable to sit in a cubicle and a computer screen day in, day out. But at the same time, it afforded me the opportunity to start listening to podcasts. And because of my interest brought up from the duck hunting experience, I started just searching for podcasts about hunting dogs. And as you know, at that time, Ron was really it. He was the only one that had a podcast on it. I know Nick Larson kind of came in shortly after. I think Tyler came in a little bit after him, if I have the timeline correct. But by me binging Ron in those earlier days, those earlier years of his podcast, it really lit a fire in me to go get into upland hunting and the pointing dogs. And once I did, it was just kind of like I had found the thing that I didn't even know I was searching for, if that's fair to say.
It is. It is. So yeah, you jumped a long ways there from little Nicky up to a podcast. I wanna jump back a little bit to little Nicky and time in grade school and high school. You mentioned that you weren't hunting, but you were fishing. My question here is, were you enjoying sitting watching television, or was the outdoors always some place that you would rather be?
Oh, we lived outside. Even though I wasn't hunting, if I wasn't on the ball field, we were outside playing basketball. We were outside fishing and creek hopping. Like once I got old enough and the parents kind of allowed me a little bit of freedom to explore, kind of still within the neighborhood, but the neighborhood on the outskirts, we had the tree lines and the pipelines and the ponds and lakes. Once I started figuring out some local spots that I could take my bike to, that fishing rod never left the bike. Like we were constantly going. I was constantly in the woods, constantly catching snakes and turtles and everything that, little boys do. But then even outside the outdoors, it was just sports. So a ton of neighborhood basketball, football, stuff like that, to where, everybody in the neighborhood knew what time it was. After school, we didn't go inside. We weren't playing video games. We weren't watching TV. That was a thing that we were kind of forced to do because the sun went down, not because we wanted to do it. And so we just stayed up outside, and I mean, just, the skinned knees and skinned elbows of just playing sports and growing up, living that active lifestyle. So every spare moment was dedicated to activity of some sort outside.
Okay. Yep. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's an easier transition for people to make when they spend a lot of time in the outdoors, whether it's sports or skinning their knees or riding their bikes, whatever that is, into the hunting community. My opinion, I get, we talk about, whenever you and I talk, we're very opinionated, but I think it makes that transition a lot easier into that. My other question there is, you mentioned sports a lot. I played and coached for many, many, many years. Um, Upland hunting can be very, how do you say that? Singular in its attendance, right? We have a tendency to, our hunting buddies are our dogs. It's easy to just pack up the truck, go for a couple hours a day, a half a day, whatever, and not have any buddies or mentorees or anything like that. It's weird when you play team sports and you make that transition, but you seem like a very serious guy. And I've told you this a bunch of times, right?
Right. I don't know what would ever give you that impression.
Whatever. So I'm going to give you this opportunity. How did you make that transition, or was team sports just, it's because I gotta have, other guys. I gotta have 8 other guys behind me, and in front of me,
uh,
but I'd rather do this by myself.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because you really are kind of going into some opinionated waters here. But like, I look back on growing up and doing the team sports to where, of course, growing up, you don't really recognize what's happening, or the life lessons that are being taught to you through an avenue such as sports. You don't fully recognize everything that's being taught to you. And so, I benefited greatly from playing those team sports. But looking back on it now, I kind of laugh at some of the team sports stuff. To be perfectly honest, I know that this will ruffle a lot of people's hair, but in the same vein that some people will look back into school and talk about the group projects always ended up being one person carrying the bulk of the load while everybody else kind of coasted. More or less, looking back on it, I kind of, right or wrong, kind of feel that way a little bit on team sports, and really kind of getting to think about it now. I kind of have more interest as an outsider looking at sports for kids growing up, such as like wrestling or even tennis or golf, like those solo pursuits, to where I think that it says a lot more about a kid or young adult that will take the responsibility on themselves and, have the discipline to get better at something and cultivate a skill that they are only, like, the outcome relies completely on them rather than the team sport of things. Because even, don't get me wrong, there was a ton of lessons that I learned that have since later in life benefited me greatly from working with team members, to where when I was in the Army and I had to, take on leadership roles and be an NCO, non-commissioned officer, and stuff like that. And then just obviously the work field, don't get me wrong, there's lessons and values in all of that. But I also recognized and saw there were a lot of kids that just skated by. And really very often it was really the more talented kids that were always told constantly over and over how great they were. You're great, you're amazing, oh, blah, blah, blah. Well, then they start buying into it. And next thing you know, they're not the kids doing any of the work at all. And they're just hiding in the back, but yet they're still getting the rewards of the playing time and all that stuff. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I was no chump in sports, but I also wasn't, the freaking protege that's being scouted when you're coming all the way up. But I think that there's pros and cons to everything you do in life, and I think that some of the team sport aspect kind of gets overblown a little bit on just the value of teamwork. And in the same breath, the same people preaching that will talk about, back to my previous analogy, the group project in the school classroom, so to speak. But I don't want anybody listening to that to take like team sports aren't worth it. But
Right.
that was just kind of my experience and how I look back on things now, to where I kind of value the solo pursuits and efforts a little bit more, just from a discipline perspective, to where if somebody really wants it, they can go get it and make it come to fruition for themselves, and not have to rely on other people to find success, if that's fair to say.
It is, and that helps me, and hopefully the people that are listening to this can understand that when you listen to Nick, right? He never makes excuses, right? He's always accountable when he talks about his dogs, when he makes a mistake or says something. He's very diligent in being accountable, and I see that when you're with your dogs, right? If your dog messes up, it's not your dog.
It's
I've,
me.
I've never heard you say that, the dog messed up, right? The dog did something that you didn't want it to do, but you put that on your shoulders. And I think that's where, when you talk about sports and team and things like that, that's hard for somebody like you and I fall into the same category. That if you're not going to hold yourself accountable, why do you expect to hold me accountable? And our dogs really, they and correct me if you think I'm wrong. I think our dogs feed off that, right? When I'm in the field with somebody that the dog does something that it shouldn't have, right? It busts a bird, whatever, the list is long. They blame it on the dog instead of taking an inner look and saying, what do I need to do to help, Ruby or Huck or somebody to get better? And it's me that's going to help that. So you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. I think, I say it all the time is, when you point your finger, you got three more pointing right back at you. And I truly kind of take it on my shoulders every time, to where we go out and, you know, dogs are going to make mistakes just like us. We are going to make mistakes. But when I'm out there training something with my dogs and they quote unquote make a mistake, I don't first blame them. Sometimes the blame lies in the dog, right? Especially the older ones that know better. Like let's be real. Sometimes they're going to test some boundaries in water, but especially when you're trying to teach something new, if they're not striding forward, if they're not taking that next step, if they're not hitting what you think that the level that they're at, I always internally look at myself first in regards to I set up something wrong. I didn't do the correct approach. I mistimed something. That there are outside factors that we just can't control, such as wind is a big one. Humidity, thermal, stuff like that. We kind of have to play the cards that we're dealt. And so, like, if I go out and I'm doing a field session with my dog and things just don't happen like I intended to, or I hate using the word hope because, really I should be going out there with a clear goal or vision of how this should play out. Instead of just hoping, like, I don't want to just go plant birds and just hope things happen. Like, I want to actually set things up deliberately and purposely. So if you go out there and the dog kind of balks at it and doesn't have the rep or the sequence that you're wanting, to me, I don't understand the people that are so quick to point at the dog. It's like, well, let's look at it. Who set it up? Okay. Well, the wind direction was wrong. Okay. Well, then that means your approach in the field was wrong. Well, there was no wind. Okay. Well, then don't go train. right? That there are decisions and choices that we can do, just like in everything in life, not to overblow dog training and make it, something bigger than what it really is. But I kind of look at this from every aspect. You've gotten on to me a few times, like, this is supposed to be fun. And let it happen. And it's, well, that's fair to say, but at the same time, like, to me, improvement is fun. Getting better at something is my fun. Other people may not be able to relate to that, but that is truly, like, my take of fun is getting better at what we're actually trying to do, accomplishing the mission, so to speak.
That explains a lot. That, especially that last couple of sentences, that paragraph, that is my fun. I like to get better. I like my dogs to get better. It's what turns you on. It's why you're out there. That explains a lot. So that
It is a hobby, and most people treat it as a hobby, and that's perfectly fine. I tell everybody, as long as it's safe, legal, and fun, have at it. But at the end of the day, like, I look at hobbies as, it's still an investment of time. It's still an opportunity cost that you could be doing, fill in the blank, whatever you want to do, spending time with family, getting work done, doing another hobby, whatever. So if I'm investing my time into something, just because it's a hobby doesn't mean I have to suck at it, right? And that's kind of the standpoint that I come at, to where, like, I'm never going to achieve that perfection or that perfect dog that doesn't exist, but that's still the fun in doing this and trying to get better, is how far can we take this? How good can we get at this? And I'm not talking about it, relating it back towards other people or comparing to other people. Come up with your goals and the vision that you want for your own dogs and how you want to hunt, and then maintain that standard.
Yep, that's perfect, and that helped a ton. So
Okay.
I'm going to tie it all together for you here
All right.
again on a perception, but I want to jump back just again a little bit. Let's go back to the coon hound.
Okay.
As you take us through the journey of dogs, right, that have come into your life, why you made those decisions, why you picked the breeds that you did. Um, be sure to be cognizant to explain to us that relationship that you have, that you feel you have, or you try to nurture with your dogs. I mean, people run the full gamut of, the dog is a tool, right? And I treat the dog like a tool, to people like me, where they're a good buddy and they go everywhere, and we just hang out and we have a good time, and we do training and bird hunting and stuff like that. So there's that full gamut. Help us understand what dogs mean in your life. And yeah, I'm just going to stop there. You understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, you're talking about the level of bond or relationship that each person has with their dogs, and I guess the viewpoint in mine and how I pursue, and to what level is ultimately, I look at dogs are a privilege to have. That they're a privilege to own. This is, you have a dog in your household, in your life, because you chose as an adult to go and purchase said dog, and you brought it into your life. Therefore, if you go buy a sporting dog breed for a purpose, any purpose, dog, not even a sporting dog breed, but any dog with a purpose, to me, you are then accepting that responsibility as the dog owner of that specific breed to bring whatever drive or purpose that dog has in life. Because to me, it is not fair for somebody to go buy a bird dog and then not ever put them in front of birds, right? There are plenty of other breeds out there that are perfectly suited to just lounge about your house. Okay. And I'm not knocking you. If you want to have a dog, there are a million breeds out there that will service whatever intentionality or purpose that you want to bring into your house with that dog, right? So, when I went and got my coonhound, It stemmed from an impression and exposure to where the red fern grows, to where I built up this entire image and daydream of what it's going to be like, you know, running through the swamps and chasing coons with my buddy, right? It was really like that was all the research that I had into it. I was a kid growing up just rereading the same book as if it was a training manual, and it really wasn't. But to me, like it made the impression that lasted a decade plus, long enough for me to actually go get that dog. And then when I got that dog, I realized I knew nothing really about it outside of that one book. And then I'm trying to play catch up. Then I'm buying other books. Then I'm trying to call a whole bunch of other people, and I just did not have that avenue to find somebody that could help me with it. So, it's like nobody has to go kill coons. Nobody has to go shoot birds to live. You're not providing for your family. So again, going back to my previous point, you chose to bring these dogs into your lifestyle. It is a privilege, but first and foremost, I want to enjoy the experience. Nobody willingly goes and buys a product hoping that it sucks the joy out of your life, right? And I think a lot of people, through ignorance, it's not intentional, it's not malicious. They just kind of like me and the coonhound. They get themselves in a situation that they're just not prepared for. They don't know about it, and instead of like looking in deeper, they just kind of let the dogs just do whatever they want, and that can show itself whether the dog is just disobedient, tearing up your house, tearing up your couches, whatever. They don't put any kind of formal training or even effort into the dogs. It's like they just kind of write it off as if that dog was the issue, when really it's back to what we were already talking about. It is the owner's issue. And so when I got into the coon hunting world with Crockett, I did it for, I don't know, 3-4 years, something like that. Every year it was kind of hit or miss on how hard or dedicated I was, but I was doing it for a number of years. And then I just realized that type of hunting didn't fit my lifestyle. But that doesn't mean that I rehomed the dog. It doesn't mean that it just went and got chained up or put in a kennel and left to, rot. I gave him the best life that I could, and we still found avenues for him to burn off the energy, for him to go run. And I still took him out and we still ran. I just wasn't going out, 10 p.m. till 5 in the morning chasing coons any longer.
Right.
And so like we had that healthy relationship inside the house to where he still had obedience. He still had boundaries within the house, even though he wasn't coon hunting. He was still getting the physical exercise and the mental stimulus, which, let's face it, some hound dogs are a stubborn bunch. Mm-hmm. I used to get compliments from a lot of people talking about how well trained he was for a coon hound on the obedience side of things. And honestly, I think that just stems from a lot of people just not willing to try it, because he honestly wasn't that difficult to train. And, I could have just gotten lucky. But again, I think it's an element of his environment more so than anything. But then the bird dogs, I realized, because that activity fits my lifestyle, I enjoy even the dog training process with them, and then the hunting. They get to do a lot more fun stuff in life, and
Yep.
my relationships are deeper with my bird dogs than it ever was with my coonhound, because of the mutual interest, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I'm gonna a couple of things went through my head here. First off, I don't think a lot of coonhound owners care about having, not care, but don't put a lot of effort into the manners part of
Yeah,
it,
it's
right?
not a priority.
Yep, yep. And then the other thing is Crockett. What a great name! Good job. I really enjoy that name. I actually logged that one in the memory banks. And then twice now you've mentioned I didn't have anywhere to turn, right? So my question here at this point is that better or the same for people that are getting in with their first dog or they want to get better with their second dog. Are there more places to turn? Is it the same? You just didn't know where to turn? Your
Once,
opinion on that?
are you talking about specifically in the hound world
Nope, I'm talking about just
in general?
dog ownership.
I think there is, I mean, this would have been '07, '08 when I was getting into the coon hunting aspect, and obviously the internet was around, but it wasn't what it is now. I mean, I think Facebook was still like college students only type of thing. So like, I mean, it just, you didn't even have the avenues to figure things out besides some like old school blog threads and just looking up different books. And I mean it was, even Google, it wasn't the same, to where like you would Google something and you had to word things very particularly just to get results to come up.
You're freaking
And
a lot of people out. What I mean, there's no internet.
right. Yeah. It's this was the time of paper maps and all kinds of
Yeah,
stuff. And that I'm not the old timer here. I mean, I guess I'm getting on up there eventually, but yeah, it's the mentors then, I mean, just 15 years ago, 20 years ago, is a far cry from what it is now, to where there are actual apps and websites dedicated to linking up mentors with new hunters. And that's why, to be perfectly honest, I love helping new hunters out when they reach out, and I get the privilege of doing that on a regular basis, is kind of giving them the point in the right direction. But at the end of the day, I don't have any patience for new hunters that don't figure anything out, because it's like, yeah, what are we talking about here? Go Google something. Like, if it's not important enough for you to go write in a quick question to Google and trying to figure out the answer for yourself, first, before you go hounding people on questions, like, I think there's a self responsibility step that often gets overlooked, or overshadowed by so many people constantly trying to help everybody, to where, like, to me, and again, this goes back to, like, this is just kind of how I'm wired. I want to look and see how can I do this myself first. And if I'm having any hiccups or really problems, that's when I'm going to go ask questions. I have a specific question, but I get, not to knock anybody that's reached out to me, but I get asked all the time. It's just like, hey, I want to get a bird dog. What do I do? You know, that's not a 5 minute question, right?
no,
And so, I think that there's a responsibility for each individual that's looking to get into anything, to go figure out the basics and foundations. And I'm all for helping everybody along that has those hurdles. But most people aren't even looking into things to figure out what those hurdles are. It's
right.
kind of like they're just starting out, like, I want to go do this, let me ask for somebody to do it for me. And to me, that's the wrong approach. And so when the coon hunting thing, it's just kind of like, I had no freaking clue what I was doing, but I made sure that I was being legal, and I was made sure I was being safe. And then at the end of the day, push comes to shove, the worst thing that was happening is I was in the woods with my dog and or my buddy that would join me from time to time, and you would just be spending time in the woods with your buddies,
Yep,
right? Like,
yep.
it's not the end of the world. And I kind of take that attitude with the bird hunting approach, where I say all the time, like, hey, if you don't shoot any birds, it's not that big of a deal, right? Like, go get chicken. Again, nobody's doing this to survive, at least that I'm
Right.
aware of. If you're doing that, then let me know, because I would love to interview you.
Yeah. There you go, audience. Well, all right. So we've taken a journey a little bit here. We've got through the coon dog, and it's getting better, right? As you're moving along, not just for you, but for a whole, for the dog and owners out there. Lead us into, all right. Now I want to keep going down this journey, picking that next dog, and what's going through your head as you pick this next dog, and you made that commitment, as you discussed, to move and get the best that you can. So walk us through that part of your life.
So more specifically, going from coon hounds to bird dogs, essentially.
Yep.
Yep. So So again, the Ron and the Hunting Dog podcast kind of lit the spark. And I was searching for something. I figured out from my previous years I wanted to do something with dogs, but in what vein, what light, I didn't really know. And then that spark got started, and it's like it just took off. Like it just, I immediately went home, and yeah, we should have brought my wife on here because she just at the time we were engaged, and I came home like, I think I want to get a pointing dog and a bird dog. And she's just like, okay. And she had no idea what that was. I didn't even really know what it was. And next thing you know, it was just a week of sitting in front of a laptop at the kitchen table, just looking at breeds, looking at NAVDA, and figuring stuff like that out. Like where do I even begin? Where do I even start? And I went the route that I would say, a lot of people at least consider when they first get into it, is the German short hair route. You talk to a lot of people, and there's a lot to back this up, but like the German short hair is the lab of the upland world, is what I describe it
Absolutely.
as, right?
Yep.
It's like if you're going to get into the waterfowl world and you want a dog, you can't go wrong with a lab. If you're getting into the upland world or versatile world, whatever you want to call it, you can do a lot worse than a German short hair. And
Right.
so once I kind of decided on that, then it was, let's start calling everybody. And I took the advice from the podcast and other resources that I found online to heart, to where call everybody. Just
Right.
I just pulled up German short hair breeders on Google, and I think I remember going like 4 pages deep on
Wow.
that to just calling everybody. And I spoke to everybody. It's funny, talking to Ethan and Kat at Standing Stone, is they were one of the first ones that I spoke to entering the world about their short hair. And I almost went with them, but then I found the breeder that we talk about, to where you know it when you come across it, when there's just, it feels right, that gut instinct. Like when you're talking to him, it's how he looked at things, I looked at things, and he's giving me the information that I didn't even know to ask for. And then he did what still surprises me to this day. He just invited us up, me and my fiance at the time, and said, hey, come look at this dog. And he was, he had a litter coming up, but one thing that he said to me was, I also have a couple quote unquote started dogs. And he was honest about it. He's like, I say started, that's truly what they are. He was like, you can get this dog and you can go hunting tomorrow. And and the way he put it was, by you getting a quote unquote started dog from him, which Rachel was just under 1 year old, he was like, you will learn more from this started dog than you can teach a puppy right now. And
That's
he just,
interesting.
he kind of planted that seed in my head, and so we took him up on the offer. We drove 7 hours up to West Virginia one weekend just to see what this is about. We still haven't even seen a bird dog in the field, right? This was brand new, and he took us out, planted birds, walked us through everything. Like, this is a pointing dog, this is what a dog looks like on point. Like, we still laugh because on that trip, like, I never even shot my bird. I mean, it was planted birds, but like, I never shot a bird, but my wife did. And so like, he knew what he was doing by giving her the shotgun and letting her shoot. And she shot the first bird. Bird gets up. He had Rachel on the field, and he had, I'll never forget it, he had a male named Chap, because he just had chaps on his hind legs, and all brown. And so he had them going, and so he got, Rachel was on point and Chap was backing, and then the bird gets up. Pam shoots it. The dog brings it back, and she just turns to me and goes, "Oh yeah, we're doing this."
Uh,
And and so really the question then was, do I get a puppy, or do I get the started dog? And it just, back to that pragmatic kind of thought process of, if I got a puppy tomorrow, what am I doing with it? I have no idea. And I've already kind of learned this through the coonhound experience. Meanwhile, I have this one dog that, yeah, she was rough around the edges, but she had already had a hunting season under her belt. She already had a little bit of loose force fetch started on her. And so I elected to go with Rachel. And I forewent, to be perfectly honest, Rachel is a very small German short hair pointer. She is very small on the scale for that. And at the time, she wasn't exactly what I was looking for looks wise, from her size to even her color and all that stuff. But again, I had learned through the coonhound experience that looks is it's not the deciding factor. It's not a priority. So like I just went with what made sense. I went with logically what I was trying to convey to my wife of like we don't pick dogs based on looks anymore. We don't pick dogs based on just color anymore. Is it a factor? Sure. Life is too short to hunt behind dogs that we find ugly, right?
Right,
But
right.
Rachel, she was half the size of the dog that I was expecting. And then going fast forward to now, I can't imagine having a dog bigger than 40 pounds. All three of my dogs are 35 to 40 pounds. So that experience in of itself completely changed the trajectory of even the type of dog I was going to get. And now, I find that I have a preference for pocket rockets rather than the 60 to 80-pound dogs. And it's just interesting how I was receptive to some of the breeder's advice, and we still kind of swap text messages here and there now. And he's no longer very active in the breeding space or the trialing space. He came from the UFTA world, which again, fast forward now, full circle. I'm starting to participate in UFTA, so it's just interesting how things kind of work its way through, and you're standing on the other end like, okay, this is how it was supposed to go, because I kind of let it unfold for me rather than me just being like, no, I want that 70-pound male brown roan dog that I had in my head. Instead, I went the exact opposite and got a 35-pound, predominantly white, small little short hair female, right? And it's you couldn't have described a better dog for me to kind of kick this whole thing off for me. And once I got her home, it was off to the races.
So was the breeder correct when he stated, right, early on, you said, you get this dog and this dog will teach you, right?
Yeah.
Being a rookie. I mean, I've told people that many times when they do I buy a puppy? It's my first dog. I've used the same line. You're going to use the same line as well if you haven't already. That a started dog can really teach a new person to the dog and hunting world more than Google or Scott or Nick could.
Yeah.
I mean, you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've learned more from screwing things up with Rachel. I call her a guinea pig, a beat up dog, whatever kind of uh, description you want to give to her. Like we all screw up. I mean, that's kind of the precipice for the profile episodes that I do. I try and convey to everybody getting into this that we all screw up
Mhm.
doing this. We all do. Like there's no exception. Even the pro trainers tell you the only difference is they've screwed up so many times that they've learned from it. And they know how to avoid those challenges. And so with Rachel, I learned so much of lessons and questions I didn't even know to ask just by going out there and doing it. But because she had that solid foundation, she already had the obedience, she already had a little bit of force fetch in her. I cleaned her up, I put manners on her, I put some polish on her. We finished force fetch. Started going down the NAVDA hole, went through some utility testing with her, and just through that aspect alone, that's kind of how I started meeting other people with interest in this space. And that's, then you start helping them work their dogs, and guys, like that is the real multiplier when you have other dogs and other people that you can go help and see a wide variety of dogs and handlers make the same mistakes you are, and what they did and how the dog reacted. You will learn more by going to a training day of any organization. NAVD is the one that comes to mind for most people. You will learn more if you leave your dog at home and go and actually help plant the birds and walk in the field and help those people train their dogs. You will learn exponentially more than if you just go and show up and run your dog and leave, which is unfortunately what I think a lot of people do. But if you're actually trying to get better and figure things out, that is how you get better, is meeting other people in the same area, or at least the kind of the same goals, and just watching how they handle their dogs. You can learn a lot of what not to do. I'm not telling you every lesson is worth you applying to your own dogs, but a lot of figuring out what you want in life is also figuring out what you don't want. And that's just as true in dog training as everything else in life.
Yep. Yep. So before we get into the real fun, controversial stuff,
All right.
I'm kidding. Finish up the journey with the dogs, right? So we've got Rachel sitting on our feet. We've found NAVDA. We're feeling more confident, things like that. Now you're adding to the stable, right? And you've figured out, I like this size dog. I like this type of dog. I definitely like a pointer, right? I like this type of hunting, right? So bring us through the next two dogs and then end that with, are we done, right, with three dogs? Or are we going to wait till someone in the stable is no longer ready to, can go out on a regular basis, take those long trips, and then I'll add to the stable? Because I don't have to ask whether you're done owning dogs. It's just, where do you go from there? So
Right.
Rachel, to where you are today, and then give us a peek into the future.
So, spent a few years with Rachel just kind of figuring things out. Life was pretty easy with one dog. Every time out, it was just figuring out what you don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. Let's figure out what you don't know so that we can rectify that. And so after a few years, I kind of fell in that hole to where I think a lot of people fall in after their first dog and they start seeing just a little bit of success. All of a sudden, they're the best trainer in the world, right? Like, you can't tell them anything. Not that I was tuning anybody out, but like, I'd done it. Like, I passed the NAVDA utility test. At the time I was thinking I was going to retest and go get the invitational, because what she got docked for on her utility run was more handler error than dog error, which there's a couple themes coming full circle throughout this conversation a number of times. But I'm in that boat to where, like, I can train all dogs, right? It's I'm not I'm not anything special. I kind of felt I was susceptible to that frame of thought just like everybody else. I wasn't as vocal about it. I wasn't going on Facebook and social media like, oh my God, come, I know everything. But to your point, like the way you described it, I'm starting to get that confidence, at least in how we were doing things in the NAVDA chapter, right? Like, you find one successful dog, or you get a little bit of success, you think that it's just replicatable, right? Like, you don't know that every dog is different, every breed is different. And so when I started getting that confidence, I'm like, all right, well, I want to get another dog. And so I go back to the same breeder. We had a healthy relationship. He had a litter coming up. I get on the wait list, and then the litter just didn't take. I wait for him to do it again, and for whatever reason, the second time didn't take again. Well, now I'm getting anxious because I'd already done a few hunting trips. I realized, like, I need dog power. I want that extra dog now. I've been patient, waiting for that other puppy that would have been, king of the world and solved all my world's problems. But it wasn't in the cards. And I remember there was a training day that I went to that a guy from Alabama showed up, and he had 3 small Munsterlanders in tow with him. And this was literally a week after that litter that I thought we were going to get another dog for fell through. And I just spent the entire day mirroring him because I had never seen Munsties. Nobody else down here had him. The closest person that I knew that had him were my buddies, the Whitakers down in Florida, but they weren't always coming up here. And so I just mirrored him, and the level of dog work I saw from him and those dogs, specifically the nose work and the tracking work, which they are known for, it just blew me away. And then I don't think anybody can say that Munsterlanders are not attractive dogs. Like, just, you put them up, they are just gorgeous dogs. And then I got to see three different ones at different age variances do what they do. And I was sold. And next thing you know, I'm driving up to Nebraska to Hunting Hills Kennel and picking up a Munsterlander. Like, within a month, I think it was. I called Chris, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I got this one on the ground," and went and got Lucy. And you want to talk about, you can take the learning curve or the steep learning cliff, if you will, with the first dog and Rachel, but she was still a started dog. I didn't get that first year of puppy interaction and exposure until Lucy. And so I feel like she really rounded me out really well when it came to the importance of exposure and not going too fast on things, to where, like, she was a rock star as a puppy. It was just like everything, it went too easy. Like, everything went way too fast and way too easy, to the point to where the day she turned 18 months, we're utility testing in NAVDA.
Mm.
And she got a prize too, barely got knocked on things. It was, she kind of, I've told the story plenty of times on the podcast before. She got docked on pointing, which, Munsties on point, and especially in the training field, are different. But I learned a ton from her. Some mostly good, but also I learned a very big lesson. If I tell everybody, the biggest thing I can tell or advise anybody coming into the space is slow down. There is no rush to do any of this stuff, especially if you're looking at it in terms of testing or trialing. Like, it's your dog, do what you want, but I'm telling you, to have a well-rounded dog. I've been doing this long enough. I know enough people. I've seen the quality hunting dogs that I want in the field. They aren't putting the jets on to go get that ribbon that at the end of the day really doesn't change anything, just to get it done, to say that they got it done, right? Like, take your time, because I feel like with Lucy, I took something out of her by pushing her too fast. And we could expand on that in an entire episode if we wanted to later. But that right there, I spent 3 or 4 years, I believe, in putting a nice gap in between dogs, for a number of different reasons. But I waited 3 or 4 years, and through my hunting experience with Lucy and Rachel, and my adventures and traveling and hunting different species in different environments, I really started fine-tuning on what I cared about. Right? Figuring out what I enjoy in the upland space and what I enjoy about the dog space. And while testing is cool, it's fun, I'm still going to do it to some level moving forward. Same thing with trialing. It's fun, but it's not my priority. My priority is hunting dogs. Like, I want to go hunt with my dog, and I'm not. I say that, and some people every now and then take offense, because it's just like, well, I prefer testing. Oh, that's fine.
Right.
My preference is hunting, right? Just like you don't want to get knocked on your preference for testing or trialing. My preference is hunting. So when I come at this, I come at it from a very hunting dog productive state of mind. And when I realized that out of the uplands specifically, the waterfowl is cool, the tracking is cool. Both, I've done a little bit of all of it. I've realized that, like, I didn't really want to prioritize, weeks of my life doing duck search training when I go duck hunt just a few times a season, right? I don't want to prioritize tracking to where I might go track one deer a season. There's certain things and that I just realized preference wise, like, I want to go hunt upland birds. And specifically, I found my passion and love in rough grouse. anybody listening to this podcast is probably sick of the rough grouse content here lately, because that's I mean, it really, it lit a fire. Like, I kind of, again, found what I didn't know I was looking for. And through that, I realized that, like, the versatile dog game is great. I love my short hair. I love my Muncie. I'll probably always have some form of German dog in the house of some sort. Uh, it was really the upland stuff that really intrigued me in rough grouse, and that's where I decided, instead of getting the Swiss Army knife, I just wanted the good knife, right? Like, I wanted that specialty knife that somebody made for a specific purpose, and I didn't need, all the other tools that come with it.
Right.
I'm not knocking it. I'm not depreciating it, but at the same time, my preference was, I want that specialist, and that's where I started looking for the English setter, and that's where Quinn came up, and now. Quinn's a year old, and not to jump too far ahead, but it's it's everything that I was imagining it could be, in terms of just the sheer enjoyment of, I'm not having to expose or train a bunch of stuff that I personally, like, don't have a priority in, or a preference in. I'm focusing on the stuff, again, back to what I was talking about earlier, where the interests kind of align, to where what she does and what she was bred to do is exactly what I want to do. I don't have to worry about cultivating 10 different things. I get to worry about one specific thing, and that's to go hunt dry birds.
Right. Right. Well, that explains a lot. I didn't know how your brain worked as you worked your way across. Now, the last point of that is, where are you going from here? Now that you've had the multi-tool, you've had the Germans, you've had the specific dogs. Has your brain let you move forward to the next one yet? Or
So, like I was describing earlier, I like to have the gap between dogs, right? And so I got a couple years to kind of figure this out, but I am already considering and trying to figure out what my next option is. What am I looking towards? And my next one is, I'm kind of considering a flushing dog, because it's something new, it's something different. I think it would be a fun challenge, and it could still line up with my purpose, right? You get a nice Springer or Cocker, or even a Flushing Lab. Take your pick. There's somebody kind of doing the game with any of those breeds, so that's a consideration of mine. Is do I open up the door and go a flushing dog route? Because I've said it before. I think one of the coolest things, when done right, is the pointing dog flushing dog combo.
right,
And I just think, to me, when it is done right, and it is a gorgeous thing to watch in the field, when
right,
you have pointing flushing dog combo. Now, when it's done wrong, it can turn into a souped up cluster real quick. But to me, like, you kind of take the both elements, and you get the pointing dog up to full steadiness, you get the flushing dog, the teamwork. Like, to me, when all of that is working in sync with each other, you're kind of hitting the highest level that you can on both sides of it, pointing and flushing. And so I think that would be a fun challenge. But I'm really enjoying the setter game right now. Like, I really am. I appreciate her mentality in the house, that off switch, what makes her tick, what makes her drive. Like, there's already a shorthand with her that I can't say that I necessarily had as just authentic or right out of the box with the other two. It was cultivated over time and experience, but there was just something with her that just immediately, me and her just kind of jived, if you will.
right.
And so right now it's kind of leaning more towards flushing dog or another setter type of situation. But I still got a little time to decide on that. But that's where I stand right now. And as you know, that can change next week.
Absolutely, as it should. Until
Yeah.
you pull the trigger, it should change daily. So now we've walked our way through Little Nicky and worked our way up through the dog scenario. What we haven't touched on is what the hell made you decide to put a podcast together?
Oh, I got stuck with the podcast, and I say that literally by the definition of it. Uh, it I I was never the one. Again, back to my previous point, to where I was operating with a certain level of confidence, but I wasn't outspoken about it. Like, I'm just not that guy. I don't like going on in any kind of place and just being like, "Oh, listen to me." Like, this right here is kind of getting me out of my comfort zone enough to talk about myself, cuz as we started off, I don't really try and do this. I can be long-winded and I can get on my soapbox if prodded a little bit, but at the same time, like, I just didn't feel like we had anything to offer. And so I had my buddy at the time, Austin and Joe, that they were kind of not hounding me, but they just kept bringing up, let's do a podcast. Joe knew the audio stuff. Austin was that kind of enthusiastic, let's just go have fun kind of guy. And then I'm more serious and pragmatic. So it's kind of like a nice little ebb and flow and balance, if you will. And I can't remember which episode or which podcast it was, and I wish I did, but Austin had been at me for a few months to doing it, and I told Ethan at Standing Stone again that, like, he was the catalyst for me finally saying I'm gonna do it. Because me and Austin were listening to some podcasts. We're still after all that information. And the podcasts, there were more of them out at the time, but there wasn't a podcast hitting on the information and the topics that really helped me out or helped us out, especially in areas that we weren't in wild bird country. I got tired of hearing from people that lived in bird country just saying, go get your dog on wild birds. It's like, you're not telling anybody anything new. You're not giving somebody an avenue to actually figure out how to do this. And so Ethan went on some podcast, and I wish that I recalled which one it was, but I don't. And somebody asked him, uh, what's the best advice that you can give somebody brand new starting out? And he was like, get pigeons. And he went on this whole birds make a bird dog kind of kick. And the host even said, well, I mean, not everybody lives in an area where they can have pigeons. So what do you advise to those people that can't have pigeons? And he was like, I don't know what to say. Get pigeons. And that right there, I called Austin immediately afterwards, and I'm like, it's not a knock against Ethan, because it's true. Pigeons are a fantastic tool. I mean, it's like, if you can find access to pigeons, get pigeons, because it is a game changer. But that right there lit the fire to where, like, I just got tired of listening to content that wasn't applicable in my situation. And I felt like between me and our buddies down here, we had enough experience to realize that, like, to do this true DIY, not everybody has the same options or resources, if you will, especially where I was living at the time. I didn't have a fraction of what I have at my disposal now. And then it was just like, okay, let's do this. But it was a very intentional. We're not experts in anything, right? We don't know anything. We've trained collectively 3 or 4 dogs amongst ourselves. So, like, we can't come at it from an expert point of view. We're going to go interview the people that have the knowledge and the information and topics that we actually cared about. And that's where it kind of took off from then on. So it kind of took off from there, and we stuck with it for a while. Austin, it was kind of bad timing on Austin. As soon as, like, we say go and we get going, all of a sudden, Austin's life just kind of explodes, and typical work and family stuff just immediately, like, he couldn't keep up with it, right? Like, he got a big promotion at work, and that required it was life stuff essentially, and so, like, so he had to bow out. Then my buddy Adam stepped in with him, and he did it for almost a year or something. And then when he ended up kind of leaving the podcast, we pretty much almost wrapped up the podcast. It was kind of like, I don't really want to do this solo. I didn't even initially want to do this. And to be perfectly honest, anybody listening to this, like, podcasting is a grind, that it may not seem like a lot, just a conversation once a week, but it's a time suck. And while you might hear at the end result an hour and a half conversation, you got to realize that it took hours of planning and money and resources to buy the equipment and put it out, especially today where everybody demands high quality everything. Like, there's resources that goes into this, and there's a reason why so many people and their brothers started podcasts to fall off after a month or two, because then they get into it and they realize after 3 episodes they don't have as much knowledge or stories to tell as they really thought they did when they first started out.
Right.
And so, when we're kind of batting around closing up shop, so to speak, there was this, when certain things are just supposed to happen, it's like there are signs telling you. And so when I was wrapping that up, I had some close buddies that kind of get in my ear like, nah, you got to keep going. And then I got a couple like just perfectly timed emails from some listeners just talking about how the podcast was such a quality resource for them. And one in particular, one guy wrote me talking about how, like, him and his son, teenage son, never had anything in common that they could bond over or do. Like, they would constantly fight and argue until they found the podcast, and then they went and got dogs, and then they were training dogs together every single day.
That's awesome.
And I felt like at the time, like, well, I was not secretly, but like really considering wrapping up the podcast. When you're getting, I don't care if that's just the only listener that you have of the show. When you're helping somebody like that, like, I take that pretty seriously. And it's not a responsibility to anybody. It's not like I owe anybody or anybody that's been involved in the podcast owed anybody. But like, when you're having that impact and influence, I know that's kind of a dirty word nowadays, but when you have that influence to some people to quote unquote make a difference, I just didn't feel like wrapping it up that soon. This was 3 years ago. Was the right decision, especially when I had a couple other buddies. Joe was still good to do the audio stuff, and a few other buddies just kind of in my ear saying keep going. So I made the decision to keep going, and we tried doing it, with me doing it solo, and then 3 years later, here I am doing it, just multiple episodes a week, almost every week. So it's this kind of crazy, something that I never really planned or was intentional about in the beginning. I never even really wanted to do it. Kind of just got thrown at me, and then I've just been too stubborn to quit ever since.
Oh, I don't know about that, but it's a great story on how it came along. I do remember the early days, and when you took over and went solo, I have to say that more focus came in as you took it over, right? It was more, there was a tunnel that I could look down, and you were clear. Like, just as an example, you didn't just do one podcast on wool. You did a whole series on it, right? So you got
Right.
that focus for me, and that's important. I can't tell you how many people I've turned on. I mean, I've got a guy down the street who's getting his first small Muncie, you know, he's got your podcast. I'm like, you figure it out. You start right here at the puppy series and you work your way through it. Nick's got it all. Another guy out in Wyoming's getting his first hunting dog, his first Brittany, you know. It's like, here you go. This is so, I mean, that's kudos to you just in relationship to wondering if you touch people and help people. And this really does. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've told to listen to you, and then have come back to me and said, that was great. That was awesome. That's helped out a lot. So I hope you keep it up. We're going to shift a little bit different now. We've worked
Yeah.
blogs, we've worked podcasts. I personally can't believe that's all there is to Nick a Dare.
Okay.
It can't be just upland hunting, dogs, right? And podcasting. There's got to be other things, right? I'm pretty sure you're not throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs for a farm team someplace.
No, no.
So, what is it that you do or you want to do? There are other aspects to everybody outside of our hunting. Can you give us a little window? I mean, I'll leave it up to you on where you want to go with that. But there's more to Nick than what we hear.
Sure. I mean, you might be over exaggerating the level of depth in me personally, but there are other outside interests for sure. I mean, you can't just throw all your eggs in one basket, such as upland or even dog. I mean, the thing that I personally enjoy about this lifestyle and this hobby choice is it gives you something to do year round. It's like you have your hunting season and you can go as hard as you want. And then by the time you're getting burned out on hunting, now it's back to training. And then, it's kind of like two different hobbies, if you will, when you consider it being hunting versus dog training. And that's kind of the theme of the podcast. If you think about it, I hit the training topics real heavy and then hunting topics real heavy. But outside of that, there are certain times, and here lately, especially this year, like I've been hammering the content and doing so many episodes so much. To be perfectly honest, there are nights to where like the last thing I want to see is another dog training book or a hunting book. To be perfectly fair, like it's just it's when you live that life and you talk about it so much like I do, it's kind of like I need a break. And this may not surprise you too much, but like if it's not hunting dog related, I just enjoy working on my property. Whether that is cultivating habitat for the birds, whether that's homesteading and growing my own vegetable garden, whether that's doing your chickens and meat chickens and the homesteading aspect of it. I truly I found my, call it piece of heaven, if you will, my slice of heaven down here in Middle Tennessee, to where like I'm close enough to society that my wife won't leave me, but far enough out to where I'm not going crazy myself by being surrounded by so many people. And so I get a lot of projects done around here. We bought a little farmhouse and it's a constant work in progress. You own some property, so that there's never not anything to do. Like I can't relate to the people that just sit around just bored, not having anything to do, because to me, like you could drive yourself crazy if you're trying to get everything done, because when you have property, it's never always done. There's always something to go do. And so if I wasn't doing a podcast or content on hunting dog stuff, I would probably be going just full on crazy into the homesteading lifestyle and canning your own food and root cellars and all kinds of stuff like that. And I dabble in it. But there's just not enough time in the day to do everything and still be a present focus in your family lifestyle. I do have my daughter, and so I'm raising her, and I am a husband, and so obviously with that comes a certain responsibility and enjoyment out of spending time, to where there are some nights to where not life can't be all about productivity. And some nights you just need to veg out on the couch with the youngin and the wife and watch a movie, right? So it's really between all those things, family time, the property, the podcasting, and the dogs, that pretty much is my life. I try and fit in some kind of exercise or fitness in every single day of some sort, but outside of that, like I can't add anything else to my life. It's not possible.
Perfect. That and I agree. It puts you outside. Having that property, and where this is going to lead next is conservation.
Okay.
Okay. We already hunt, or a lot of us hunt, fish, train dogs. We're outside, right? So when we talk about conservation, I'm gonna I'm gonna leave it up to you to tell me what you think conservation is and what role we play in it as upland hunters, as dog owners, as people who care about the environment and things like that. I've got my own opinion, but this is getting Nick. All right, let's learn about Nick. I'll let you decide. I mean, this can go
This can go sideways.
this can be tough, right?
Yeah.
It can be as easy as join a group. It can be as tough as add another thing to your plate, right?
This the best way I can sum this up is because everybody's situation and picture, it looks completely different when it comes to this topic. So I try and be fair and recognize that as much as possible. But the easiest way that I have come to look at describing conservation and what is or isn't is, did it take effort? Did it take time from you? Because let's face it, we can sit here, everybody's heard the same talking point. Hunting is conservation. No, it's not. I'm sorry. Like, I know what they're trying to say in that. I understand the Pittman Robertson angle. I get all that. But that is, to me personally, again, if you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear it. Scott, I'm always receptive to this stuff.
You are.
But I personally do not agree with that statement, at least in how it's used. I think it started out as I think it started out as a way for hunters to try and showcase that, like, hey, we care, right? Like, we care about conservation, we care about the birds, we care about the fill in the species beyond our personal taking of that species. But what it's turned into, in my personal belief, is I've heard from too many people that use that as an excuse or a scapegoat, if you will, of, I bought a hunting license so I don't have to do anything else. And so I think it's an example of something that was well intentioned and had initially a good message, and I think it was latched onto by the people that felt like that was good enough. And to me, the buying a hunting license and that excise tax going to fund habitat conservation doesn't make you a conservationist any more than you filling out that paperwork at 18 to become to file for the draft makes you a US veteran, right? Like, it's a byproduct. You legally have to do that. And so you don't get to claim that as your personal decision, right? So that aside, it's I know that that's a hot button issue, but believe it or not, guys, I have literally been around people that use that as an excuse when somebody comes at them saying, like, you don't do enough, or you haven't done this, you haven't done that. I have seen people literally say, I bought 5 hunting licenses last year while I went around the country and hunted, as if that gives them, the right to be considered conservationists. And so take that for what it is, whether you agree with me or not. That's kind of where I'm coming at from this. And don't get me wrong, I love the Pittman Robertson Act. I mean, we all benefit from the Pittman Robertson. Absolutely. But we fight for it. We need it. We deserve it. The country, the wildlife deserves it. So, like, I'm going to be there front lines fighting for it, just like last year when they tried overturning it again. So, like, and it's also the same thing on the fishing side, the Dingle Johnson, it's the same thing. Those excise taxes, we have to keep an eye on that and keep that where it's at. But I wish people would stop using hunters or conservationists as a talking point. It's to me, it's short-sighted, and again, it's just a byproduct of something that you legally have to do to go do that activity. So outside of that, then you have people that, they'll go buy a membership at whatever organization for $35 a month or a year. And I do it, we all do it. And if that's all you can do, by all means, do it. Support the species and the organization of your choice to the level that you can, right? Whether that's funding or just monetary donations, like the $35 membership, what have you. And you might be too busy to really participate any further beyond that, right? And that's not for me to turn my nose up at you. That's not me to preach to you and say that you got to do more, you got to do more. What I say is, if you can do more, do more, because $35, that's not even the price of an actual small game hunting license in most states anymore. So how is you giving $35 to, fill in the blank organization? How does that counteract like you going hunting? Like, is it an even trade? I guess is the best way that I can describe it. And me personally, I don't feel like when I send off $35 and then they're going to send me back, whatever knife or jacket or whatever it is promotion that they're giving, like, it's like, okay, so $35 minus the cost of developing this product, let's call it $15 at the end of the day, is actually going towards habitat. To me, I don't feel like that's enough. And so I try and donate the most prized resource I feel like we all have to offer is our time. The most valuable resource that we have beyond money is our time. And so there are a million things going on in my home state of Tennessee that I personally detest, and I think that they are dropping the ball in substantially different ways. And I make my voice and opinion heard and known to all those players in it. But they also know, and the reason why they continue to listen to me, and I have those communication avenues to them, is because I show up. If they text, email, I'm on the email list, social media, whatever, and there is a local burn day, if there's a local, community meeting that you need to go defend a cut on, if there's a habitat day to highlight and educate, go show up. Show up with boots on the ground, show up with your time, because let's face it, everybody's willing to make the sacrifice of their time to go hunt with their dogs. But and they might even cry about the lack of opportunity or the bird numbers or the population, but they aren't even willing to sacrifice, forget showing up to those events. They're not even willing to sacrifice 15 minutes of their evening to read about the actual habitat work being done. They won't sacrifice 5 minutes to go put their public comment on the Forest Service website decrying, what asinine excuses that they have for not meeting their cut quota in the national forest anymore, right? Like, but when they go out, they'll be the first ones to cry about not having birds, and they might as well not even have a bird dog, but yet you've never seen them at the community meetings.
Right.
They've never been there. And then if you call them out on it, they say that you're taking it too serious. I'm like, well, you're the one that were just crying about not having birds and having access, right? And so I think there's a balancing act. Not everybody can show up to everything. You can't make a comment on everything. Tennessee is a very wide state. So to get to one end to the next can take you 9 to 10 hours, depending on where you're going. Like, I understand that you have to pick and choose on what you can support, but you also have to realize that just bashing the local DNR or game agency is not enough. You also have to suggest and give them ideas and suggestions. Now, there's certain crossroads that I find myself in a lot of ways right now within the state, to where I've given suggestions and offerings to help in any way, shape, or form, even if it's just using what platform I have right here to help in some small way, that they don't take you up on. At that point, I think that you have the right to call them out on it. Mm-hmm. But you have to be involved to be able to call people out on it. You going on Facebook and crying about not having birds, crying about the too many hunters, crying about, bag limits, whatever, fill in the blank, you're just crying on Facebook. Nobody's ever going to take you serious. The time and place to do that is, once again, showing up to those commission meetings, showing up to the community meetings. And I'm not talking about just showing up and sitting on the sidelines. No, you need to actually get up there and speak your part, or else it kind of goes into that saying on, everybody, especially nowadays, is political in some way, shape, or another. Like, I try and keep that crap as far away from my platform as possible.
Yep.
But if you don't vote, you don't you don't have a gripe. You can't complain about anything, right? If you don't actually vote. I kind of look at the same thing in conservation. If you don't actually participate beyond buying a hunting license, you don't get an opinion. Like, I don't even think it's
Right.
worth listening to you, and that's just kind of how I come at it.
Yep. So for the audience that's going to hear this and going to see this, I asked this question of Nick because of his passion, right? For the thing that we enjoy. All right. Nick and I have talked about this, but I know his audience hasn't heard this level of passion. I implore everybody to have a level of passion for conservation, for the things that you love, your civic duty, right? School board meetings, town hall meetings, your local DNR. And that's why I asked, I kind of set you up, Nick, and I don't apologize, but I needed that to have a little explanation. We need that level of passion to motivate people to get out. And that's where, if you look at my age group, and I know we could talk about this quite a bit, right? My age group is responsible for not just the successes, right? We have a lot of failures on our end as well. And it was that level of passion that we didn't have. We threw a lot of money at things and expected other people to do it. Didn't keep an eye on the ball a lot of times, didn't get involved at that level. So we're handing the ball off, so to speak, to Nick, you and the people that are coming up behind you and a small group ahead of you. And I'm hoping that what you just said helps people get that passion and just attend one meeting in the next year. Right? Just one. Just go try one. Pick one that you feel pretty passionate about, and go listen to the other passion in the room. Go to one cutting, one day, one half day, do whatever. Just make that commitment and see where it leads you. It might give you the same passion that Nick has or I have. So that is why I kind of led you down that path. I also take ownership for my age group, right? We didn't do everything perfect, and we're not to blame for everything either, but we're handing it off, so we want that to happen.
Well, that's such a good point to make, and it's one of those. I don't highlight hardly anything that I actually personally go do myself. Like, I do more behind the scenes than anything, just because to me, like, there's certain things that just don't deserve notoriety. I don't even know if that highlighting it or public. To me, like, I'm hunting and I am utilizing the resources and the opportunities. Like, I shouldn't have to promote me, trying to get involved to the level that I have become, right? Like, there's just certain things that are going to stay behind curtains on my end anyway. But the generational thing is probably the most common discussion that comes up when I get feedback from listeners or somebody reaches out to me with an issue. Coming from the older one, it's always about, my generation and younger don't have any respect for them. And then, vice versa, the younger guys are always talking about, well, the boomers, it was on their watch that all of this happened. And to me, like, there's elements of truth in both sides, not to be a cop out on this, but there are people to where, they don't want to put in the work on my generation and figure out where to go hunt. They're going to go hotspot or whatever, right? They're not going to consider shooting up an entire covey from really being detrimental to the overall population in an area. They're just going to go do it because it's like, well, how often do you come across that, right?
Right.
But then the boomers, like, I think I've gotten a handful of messages or just discussions in person as I kind of travel the country, to where I've had a number of people from the older generation say it's up to y'all to fix. And I'm sorry, like y'all aren't dead yet, right?
Yeah,
Like why is it, when did it become y'all break it, we fix it, right? I will help as much as I possibly can to fix something, but I also think that the older generation, while they have talking points and some fair criticisms to make of my generation and younger, especially you want to talk about the cesspool of social media. I think there are some older guys and older generation guys that need to hear that, like, you're not talking to anybody on Facebook. You're doing nothing.
right,
Absolutely nothing. You're talking to your echo chamber.
right,
It was broke on your watch, to your previous point, Scott. Like, it was on y'all's watch that anything good happened. Yeah, it was good. Everything bad happened was on your watch as well.
right.
You don't get to just take in the good and then pass on the bad and the broken to the next generation and then complain about the next generation on Facebook as if you're doing anything.
Right.
And then, the new generation comes in and like, oh, well, they may not, you don't know what you don't know, and so they're reaching out asking for help, asking questions that they just get bashed by some of the older generation. And then when they ask, like, well, I mean, how do I do this, how do I go about figuring this out the quote unquote right way, and they're like, well, go find a mentor. How about you become the mentor? Right?
Right.
Like, I get so tired of just, it's kind of like passing off all the broken to the next generation. It's the same thing when they talk about mentorship. They're real quick to tell somebody to go get a mentor, but then they're not mentoring anybody else outside of their own family, right? And again, I'm not telling anybody what they should or shouldn't do. Just understand the flaws in some of your logic, right? Like, there are good and bad to everything, and I'll be the first to admit, like, I don't I don't relate to a lot of what my generation and younger do, and their perspectives on a lot of stuff, but also, like, I just get tired of the older generation just always looking at us saying, "Oh, y'all got to go fix it," but then the only thing that they do is they'll go show up at the banquet or a youth hunt. It's kind of
Right.
like, well, I didn't see you at that community meeting standing up and talking either. Where are you at? And
Yep.
all of this happened, you know, that forest didn't turn 40, 50 years old on my watch. I'm not even 40, 50 years old yet. So, like, there needs to be some kind of self responsibility, and look internally before you start pointing fingers at my generation saying we have to fix what y'all broke.
I
And
agree.
not to imply that y'all broke everything, but to your point, like, you
It
can't
broke
take the
on my
good and
watch.
ignore the bad. It does nothing like that works in life.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, my grandpa said, yep, this one broke on my watch. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
Uh, I agree. I'm sorry I couldn't fix it, right? Before I quit hunting, but it definitely broke on my watch. Market hunting, things like that. I mean, the list goes on. Your generation will have things that you broke and you
Yeah.
fixed, but you got to man up at some point and just go, you know what? Quit pointing fingers. Work together. Stop it.
Yeah.
Just be humble. Right?
Yeah.
Yep. I messed up.
At,
I
at,
got it.
at the end of the day, I don't care who threw the baseball through the window. The window's still broken. Let's fix it, and we're not going to fix it by the older generation pointing the finger, talking about, millennials this, millennials that, and then vice versa. Us just looking and, oh, the boomers, broke it. They need to fix. We all need to come together and fix it, because guess what? The people that are against us, and I say us as hunters, the people that are against us, they aren't having this internal fighting. You have multiple subsections of the population coming together and aligning from that shared interest of whether it's anti-hunting, anti-cutting, it doesn't matter, it all ends up in the same result. And if they can manage to get on the same page with completely different motivations, why can us as hunters, who we all have the same shared motivation, I don't understand why we can't come together better. And I know that this can kind of get a little, uh, you know, optimistic, just like, oh, kumbaya, everybody come together. But at the end of the day, like, if you truly care about that, that has to be a priority for us to actually succeed in this, because, like it or not, we're outnumbered. It's as simple as that.
Right. Right. All right. So we hit a couple of good topics there. As we come down the home stretch, we're going to do some fun ones.
Okay.
And so put your I'm going to have fun Scott hat on.
All right.
All right. If you could interview one person, living or not, who would that be?
Mm. One person. I don't I don't know. It's you said it's for fun, so I'm not trying to make this.
Doesn't have to be dog, doesn't have to be hunting, doesn't have to, it'd be for this podcast, topic. It would be nice if it was dog or hunting related, but we're talking about Nick here.
Yeah. I I would love to go back in time, and this might be a little cliche, especially in the outdoor world, but I would love to interview Daniel Boone.
Oh, great one.
Yeah, I've read numerous biographies. The Davy Crockett would be kind of fun, especially with the Tennessee element. But Boone has some Tennessee roots here and there as well. Not as much as as Crockett, but I would love to interview Boone.
That's a good one. That's a good one. All right. Acorn or acorn?
I go Acorn. I just I
What the
don't know.
heck?
Yeah, I know.
I'm sure I'd
I'm
nail that
Southern.
one.
It's supposed to be acorn, but acorn. I don't know. That's just kind of how I was brought up with. It's kind of like the pecan or pecan, right? And it's like
Right.
I'm going pecan. I guess I'm a little too well spoken for the average Southerner. I don't know.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's where you're going to get all your emails and
Right?
right?
Yeah.
Dude, it's acorn. Yeah. All right. So I know you have stated for everybody forever the rough grouse, it's your bird, it's your passion. But you have spent the last couple of years notching some tabs in your belt with different birds in different states and different environments and different people. Is there a bird? Is there a state that's starting to put some pressure on your beloved king?
Oh man, it's Huns are fun. I really like Huns. Uh, Chucker are up there, but I can't put them up so high because I've literally hunted them for 3 days now. So like my window of opportunity on Chucker just aren't what other species have shown me so far. But Huns, whether that was Montana, North Dakota, Idaho now, it's like I feel like I've gotten a big enough window of viewing on Huns to really appreciate them. And to me, like I was actually having this conversation with another Patreon patron the other day because a buddy of his was trying to compare the difficulty of Huns for a dog to the difficulty of a rough grouse to a dog. And me personally, I'm sorry, like without going into why, like the difficulty of a rough grouse consistently for a dog to handle is much more than a Hun, in my personal opinion and experience. But the way I described it to him is Huns to me are just bob white quail that are slightly bigger and a little bit tougher. And to me, like they're just gorgeous birds. They flush angry. The environment that they're in is like, while they are in ag country, and I'm not particularly the most fond of hunting birds around agriculture, they will venture far enough away from ag to make it really enjoyable. They're going to be on the brush lines, they're going to be in the fence lines, they're going to be in that shrub like habitat that you'll find bob whites in. But then when I came across Huns while hunting chucker up there in those mountains and hills, it just like they took on an extra step on my hierarchy of upland birds. And Huns are really special.
That's a great choice. I figured something was coming up behind it, right? So staying with the bird topic, we won't go through your whole list, right, of what you've hunted so far. What's next on the list for you?
I don't know. It's I've kind of more or less just kind of found myself within spitting distance of the upland slam. Like, I still have a handful of birds that I still have to experience, but I don't know. This year alone, especially, it's probably a little too recent of me going on my new adventure, new species, new place trip in Colorado and Idaho. So I sought after this year trying to knock off 4 new species at the very start of this season. And I succeeded in 3 out of the 4. And right now I'm just not that bloodthirsty or motivated to go chasing a new species at the moment. I kind of find myself in the season that I just want to become like the best rough grouse hunter that I possibly can right now. And of course, ask me come spring when it's time to start planning my fall trips, and I'll give you a new answer. But at some point, I'm gonna have to go get the valley quail and mountain quail. I'm gonna have to go get that. Anybody that's been listening long enough, I didn't really get a good opportunity on the Merns in Arizona last year. Every time we got into them, I was carrying the camera instead of the shotgun, and we didn't have my dogs on the ground. So I'm gonna have to redo Merns at some point. But outside of those, it's like I don't really see myself going to Alaska anytime soon to get the rock or willow ptarmigan. So that's kind of a far cry. But when you talk about bird species, this is an interesting question, especially when you put it in the light of the upland slam. Is for the life of me, I don't understand why we require the rock and willow ptarmigan in Alaska on the upland slam, but we don't require all of the species that are now home to Hawaii, right? Because that's a state in the U.S. and they have a number of species that live out there truly wild that you can go hunt, but yet they're not added to the upland slam list. I don't know if it's because it's an island, whereas you can still technically get up to Alaska if you want to drive, through Canada, you can get there. I don't know why, but to me, like I think that I don't know who the powers are that in this industry that decide what's thrown on the slam or not. But to me, if you're going to include those ptarmigan up in Alaska, to me, you have to include the Franklin and that black pheasant that Hawaii has as well.
Yep. Yep.
But that's just me. I know Hawaii has some challenges and certain time links that you have to have your dogs in quarantine and stuff like that. So that might play another aspect of it. But I would like feedback from listeners on why. Why do we count the rock and willow ptarmigan? Because it's not in the lower 48, but we don't count the Hawaii species now.
Yep. So we want to see that in the comments below. And we also want to know who's responsible for setting the list, right? So we can have
Right.
a discussion. They should be on your podcast.
Right.
Who made
Yeah.
that decision? Let's
Yeah.
talk
Who
to 'em.
who elected them to make the decision? Because me personally, I've seen some people put the wild turkey on the upland slam list too, and I'm sorry. Like to me, if it's the same reason why I don't put the Himalayan snowcock on the list too. If you can't really safely hunt the bird with your dogs, to me it doesn't go on the list. And while some people, you can hunt the snowcock with your dogs, it's not exactly the safest hunt for the dogs, from my understanding. I personally haven't witnessed that type of hunting, but after doing some ptarmigan walks in Colorado, I can only imagine it, and I personally just don't really have any interest in even attempting that.
Yeah. Yeah. And do we start putting asterisks next to the slam being that, right? Example, greater and lesser prairie chickens.
Right.
As those begin to go away, the people before, the old farts like me, right?
Yep.
Versus your generation that might not have that opportunity to get both of those onto the list, So I
Yeah.
mean, it'd be a great conversation. So down below, who's responsible?
Yeah. Who? Yeah. Who has that decision making capability in this world?
Yep. All right, we're coming towards the end here.
All right.
I know based on the hat you're wearing, all right, you've made that decision. Prior to this, you were, I don't know, you weren't you weren't even close to being a gun snob. I mean, you weren't even close. In fact, you kind of lean the other way and you look at my gun and you go, oh, Mr. Fancy Pants, blah, blah, blah. You're making that transition. My thought is, do you look at this transition the way that you looked at your transition in dogs to a specialty dog? Now you're moving your guns into a specialty gun. It fits you. It's the gauge you want, things like that. What are your expectations for this new gun?
Yeah, I haven't thought of it that way, but yeah, you're right. Is it really is kind of a specialty gun. I mean, it's for those that aren't watching this on the YouTube video, but I'm wearing the Upland Gun Company hat, and I'm awaiting. From my understanding, I actually kind of got a message from Larson the other day to where I may or may not be getting getting the shotgun here in a few weeks, finally, and so I'm getting excited. But to your point, like I'm just not the biggest gear guy in general, right? Like there are some guys that just love gear shopping and considering this or that. It's like to me, I've always just been, if it works, it's good enough for me. Like, does it serve a purpose, and is it tough? Like I don't know. I just my that side of my brain has just never really been there. Like I'll do it on dogs, but I don't do it on gear, which is kind of interesting. But when I realized again, we don't have to suck at our hobbies. And when I go on these trips and you go travel, 20 hours away and you're just missing birds. I've done a couple trips to where just my shooting has impacted the results of the trip from an enjoyment level enough to where like okay, I need to actually start focusing in on this and getting better. And then of course you start talking to the guys that are ahead of me on that learning curve, and they're all saying the same thing: go get fitted. Whether you get a custom gun or not, like go get fitted. Let's figure out what's wrong with your current setup before we go figuring out the new setup. And that's kind of where it started, was me getting fitted. And of course I have that YouTube video of me doing so with Dell out as well, so anybody can kind of go check that out. But through that process I realized there's so much that goes into shooting, which you kind of know without knowing. Like like okay, the form and everything, like it is a skill set just like anything else, right? Your golf swing, there's a certain form and mechanics that bleeds into a quality golf swing, a consistent golf swing. So there's no difference when you put that in the light of shooting your shotgun, right? If it wasn't an acquired skill set, then there wouldn't be competitions for it. And so when I started going down that route and I realized like, okay, there's mechanics, I can get improved. And then it starts working into my brain to where how can I improve? How can I get better? And it kind of fan that flame to where like, okay, now I can be a little bit more intentional about it. And then once I realized I was making do with a shotgun that while my CZ Bob White 20 gauge, I shot a ton of birds with it and it was more than up to the task. It wasn't the right fit for me by not just a small amount, but I was a lot, like I think it was like an inch and a half off on the length of pool. Like it just, I was shooting a youth shotgun. It wasn't a youth shotgun. And so once I started doing the tri-gun and then just getting to actually feel what a true shotgun fitted to me, or at least the length of pool was, you couldn't argue the difference of how the mount on the smaller shotgun felt compared to the one that actually was true to my size. And then of course with the new shotgun coming, it is more of a specialty. It is it's a 20 gauge Venus side by side, and then I got the 28 gauge barrel swap coming with it, so I can really kind of fine tune it. If I want to go shoot some ducks, it's more than capable of doing that with the right load. And that's kind of where I landed, to where earlier, years ago, I realized like, while I enjoy the occasional duck hunt, that's not why I do this, right? So it's like I will do it on occasion. To me, having that specialty gun that will do that on occasion is just fine. But I wanted something that was, you know, actually really made and tailored for the specific case. And, whether you want to argue it's for practicality or just the tradition of it, either way, that's kind of where I landed. Now, if you're the guy that you're that true draught guy, the German dog guy, the short hair guy, the versatile, that you're going to be out there shooting quail today, ducks tomorrow, and then you need to go track a deer or even go shoot a couple rabbits. You can't argue with somebody that's just like, hey, go get an 870 pump, right? Like, or one of those auto loaders. There's the right tool for however you want to play this game. And so
Right.
it to me, shotguns more or less have kind of entered that world of dog breed. It's kind of, what do you hope to get out of it, and then pick the right tool for the right job.
Yep. I will ask you that question again next year and see what your answer is after you've gotten a hunting season under your belt with the new gun.
All
I think
right.
you'll be impressed. Last question before I let you wrap this up.
Yep.
We've heard it, we've read it, we've even said it ourselves, probably most of us, right? If you're lucky, you're allowed one great bird dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
I disagree, but I'd like to know, do you think that's going to be true? And um, is one of yours the best dog you think you'll ever own?
I don't think that I'm not a soulmate believer. Like, I don't believe that, everybody's born with their one soulmate that they're meant to marry in life. I think that just like our own relationships are built through mutual respect and effort, and just, everything else aligning like it should. And I kind of look at that in the same vein as your dog, right? Like, everybody's perfect dog is completely different than the next person, because I'm coming at it from a different perspective than you are. What I want out of my dog is different than yours. And so then every dog is different. We say that almost every single episode. There's
Right.
common threads amongst every episode, and one of them is every dog is built different. So I have yet to see a dog that goes out and will hunt how their owner absolutely wants to hunt, their preference, consistently day in, day out, to where that owner's never going to go home one day and be like, man, Fifi really, just busted that covey of whatever. It happens. And I think anybody that's claiming that they had that one dog, you may care for that dog more so than others. You may have that relationship, but to me, like, if I have that one dog and I'm sitting here saying like, this is my one dog, that's that's kind of losing the motivation to continue doing it. Because if you've already had the perfect dog for you, why keep trying, right?
Right. Right.
You may have, like, you may have had the dog that's just like, so far that's been my best dog, whether bird finding abilities or just enjoyment of hunting or whatever. But to me, if you're already saying that I got that one dog, well, then you're done. Like, you can't top it. Why even try?
Right.
Just don't get another dog. Call it a day and go home.
Yeah. It's like
But
having a kid, and that's the perfect kid. Any
yeah,
kid that comes after it, well, get to the back of the line,
right, exactly.
you know?
And I mean, again, we're kind of getting into semantics of words, and what do you mean by like the one dog? But that's the way I look at it. Is, the way I'm built is I'm going to have a good quality hunting dog, and it may be the best dog I've had to date, but I'm going to look at what went into that dog, whether it's genetics, exposure, lifestyle, opportunities, fill in the blank. I'm going to try and dissect and figure out what made that dog the best dog, and then try and repeat that, and then improve off of that. To me, that should be the goal of every responsible dog breeder as well. I don't think I've ever met a dog breeder that's like, we nailed it. We got it. This is the perfect litter. I got the NAVDA, litter award. I'm done. Call it a day. No, they're going to go back to the drawing table, back to their science lab, and they're going to start comparing genetics and outcrosses, and they're going to figure out, okay, that one was really good. How can we improve it? It's like, okay, the bid ability on that litter, they had all the skills and freak natural ability in the world that they needed. The bid ability was there. They did it in 8 months. How do we make the dog that does it in 5 months? Right.
Right.
There's always room for improvement. And if you're, and I think it comes down to the just type of person. Some people are just willing to concede stuff like that. And I'm personally not, I'm just not built that way.
Yeah. And I think the question was more along the line of the verbiage that we use and we grew up with, right? If you're lucky, you're going to be allowed one great dog,
Mm,
right? That's more along the line of, do you have a perfect dog? It's that you're going to get allowed somewhere along the line, right? Divine intervention is going to take place and Fifi is going to come into your life and it's going to be, it's a great dog. I only get one. I just wanted I disagree. I think it's the stage of life. I think, that short hair came into your life at the perfect time.
yeah.
It was the greatest dog at that point in time of your life.
Yeah.
So
That's a great way of putting it. Is Rachel was my one dog that was perfect for me at the perfect time.
yep.
And different stages. We talk about the different stages of hunters. There's a different stage in what we get in and out of this. And you can't tell me that, like, while, I mean, heck, you were in Idaho with us. You saw to where, like, I'm gung ho. I'm young enough and in shape enough to where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go eat that hill and I'm going to go find some birds with this dog. And you were just, no, I'm going to go, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go do what hunt that I can go do right now. And your dogs are tailor made for that, to where right now my dogs are tailor made for really, doing those hard hunts. And
Right.
so, we have different seasons in life, not just from a hunting perspective, but just in general of our physical capabilities, of our desires. I doubt in 20, 30 years, I'm going to want to go climb that mountain to go look for one ptarmigan. But you know what? Right now, I got enough little piss and vinegar in me that I'm going to go do that. And so,
Absolutely. And you'd be stupid not to.
right. And so, like, I don't understand the perfect one dog. I think that, we're always evolving. The tools that we need for what we're after should evolve with us as well.
Yeah. And then the only reason I brought that up is because I get that question often enough. Is Huckleberry your one great dog? Was Grizzly Bear your one great dog? And it's kind of like, for the point and period of time in my life, I had 3 kids running around, right? Coda was perfect. Little training, very little training. Could I afford him? But every time we went out, he understood and he did the best he could with the tools I gave him and God gave him. And so he was the perfect dog to have, the one great dog to have when you have 3 kids running around your house. So
Exactly.
that's what I try to explain. And I just wanted to know if you agree with
Absolutely.
that. I made a lot of questions and thank you. You gave me a great perspective into, why you're serious when you're serious and your aspirations and how you move through this journey. And then, what you do outside of this. So thank you. I appreciate it. I know it was a long time coming, but
Yep.
thanks for sitting down and doing this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, initially when you first initially offered up the idea or suggestion, of course, I'm like, I don't know. It's just, the show's not about me. I truly come at this from, not to beat a dead horse, but like, I just want the show to be valuable. The information, I want people, if they're going to invest an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is every week with me, I want them to feel like they're coming away with something. And I never really, while I'll sprinkle in my experiences or thoughts on occasion, or just kind of add a little bit of just round out some of the topics and add my 2 cents in. Like, I just never really thought that my own personal experiences or background really mattered all that much. And then, you kind of said that. And again, I fielded the question with some other listeners and Patreon patrons who are active, and we stay in touch, and we've developed relationships, and every single one of them immediately, yes, I want to hear that. So, I appreciate you staying on my case about it and constantly suggesting it. And of course, taking the time today to play Stump the Chump and ask me the questions, but also just coming up with the questions and layout. It might be a little different. It's a change of pace to be getting interviewed on my own podcast, but
Yeah.
anybody that's been listening to GDIY for 4 years, they understand that it's not the same show week to week. I'm not afraid to go off on some random topics, but that is the fun in of it for me. And if it provides people some value and at least some relatability at the very least, then I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate it. And then for everybody else out there that had a question that I didn't ask, write it in the comments. Nick will return it.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody seems so shocked when they write me a question and I actually respond. I get, oh, thanks for responding. I'm like, well, I mean, did you not think I would when you sent me the question? Now, of course, as knock on wood, this continues to grow bigger and bigger. My responsive time is suffering. I'm not as quick as I once was. But the Patreon option that I do prioritize you guys. You're one of my longest reigning patrons, if you will, and it's I'm always going to give you guys first crack at whatever kind of question or just access to me in whatever way you guys want. But social media comments, leave them, and eventually I'm gonna get to it. If I don't, then I overlooked it and I messed up. Don't be afraid to reach out again and ask me again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if the majority of your questions are coming from your Patreons, we'll just hook up another Zoom room and do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a
We'll have a second
collectively
interview.
grilling session.
Next, you'll be on 60 Minutes. So yeah,
Right.
good.
Yeah. Well, absolutely, man. Scott, I appreciate it. And I'm going to get off my soapbox answering your questions now, if that's all right with you.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. This was presented by Standing Stone Supply, DT Systems, Onyx Hunt, Final Rise, and Upland Gun Company. It was obviously a little bit different style of an episode, and the listeners of the podcast, you might be asking, why get interviewed on your own show? And to be perfectly honest, this is some feedback and requests I've received numerous times throughout the years that, whether it was listeners reaching out and I'm on the phone, or Patreon patrons, and they're always asking a little bit more about me and my backstory and some context around some of my experiences. And while I did one of the first profile episodes way back when, that was like 3.5 years ago when I did that profile. And so I just thought that it was time to do kind of a refresh and just kind of update a few things on that. And of course, being 3.5 years back in the back catalog, even though it's still there, if you guys wanted to go listen to it, certain things change. And, even just how we presented the information, the content has grown and the quality is better. So I just thought it was time to circle back around and kind of just update that profile episode. And at the end of the day, it was something fun to do. It got me out of my normal routine, out of my comfort zone, and I really appreciate that. I like doing things different that kind of forces me to I don't know, just stay with the times, try new things, and I don't know. It was just fun. Now you might also be asking, well, why Scott? Why have a listener of the show interview you? And there's a few considerations when it comes to that. And first and foremost is, as we kind of talked about in the episode briefly, is he was the most adamant about it. While I've gotten this feedback from a number of listeners and supporters over the years, he's one that's constantly, every time I kind of cross paths with Scott, he's constantly bringing it up and saying, we need to know a little bit more about you. We need to know the backstory. And he's also just been one of the longest supporters of the show. I know he didn't just start listening, a couple weeks ago and suggested something like this. He's as he said in this episode, he's kind of been here since the beginning, so he's kind of familiar with what the trajectory of the show and the podcast and how it developed over the years, and kind of what we strive to do, and what we try and bring through all our episodes. And also he's gotten to know me just a little bit outside of the podcast, and through the support role. We've run into each other at Pheasant Fest. We shared a few days in Utah and Idaho earlier this year, and then him and Val, his wife, really kind of saved my bacon when it came to finding a vet in Minnesota. And for those of you listening that may not be familiar with that story, Quinn, my little setter, she caught a grass seed, a Sicily seed to be specific, behind the third eyelid. And I could not find a vet that would work us in for something as simple as pulling a grass seed out. And sometimes it just, that's how it goes when you're on the road and you need emergency vet services. But I mean, I was calling every vet within a few hours of where I was at in Minnesota, and they were honestly just telling me to go to Fargo, North Dakota. That was the closest place that would fit me in under, I think I was getting numerous vets giving me a month and a half wait period, which obviously, would not work in my situation. But I called Scott. I knew he was just a little bit away from kind of the area I was hunting, and he called his vet, and he had a contact there, and he was able to fit me in. And he had me up to his place, and Val made me some good lunch and spoiled me a little bit. And so I was just really appreciative of their generosity and him making the phone call, which kind of says a lot about the community that we're in, is we can all have differing opinions and thought processes when it comes to a lot of this stuff, as you guys heard throughout this episode. But you're going to strike up friendships and relationships along the way with a lot of people that everybody's kind of there to help everybody at the end of the day, from what I've at least noticed on my end. And so Scott and Val, they're just one of they're some of the good ones within the community. And so I just thought it would be fun, especially with him always up my case about doing an episode like this. It's like, all right, well, now's your chance. And I did vet the idea with a bunch of other listeners, and they thought it would be fun and a good idea. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm going to obviously, this was fun and enjoyable, but I'm going to try and get back onto some more relevant topics, I would say, moving forward. And that being said, this episode, this is one of the first few, but I'm really focusing in on providing the video component to this podcast over on YouTube. So if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't checked us out on YouTube, go Google it, hit, search Gundog Yourself on YouTube, hit the link in the show notes. There's a number of different ways you can get there, and hit the subscribe button, and you can catch this interview in video. And I'm going to be trying to do this with, if not all of the episodes moving forward, at least the vast majority of them. So hit subscribe so you can make sure that you catch future episodes. And I appreciate you kind of playing along and listening to this different style of an episode. Again, hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts and feedback on this, whether that's you agreeing with me on some things, disagreeing with me, as we said in the episode. I'm open to criticism and feedback as long as it's constructive. That's actually how Scott first reached out to me, was he had a concern over something that I said on a previous episode, and then fast forward, here we are, and he's freaking interviewing me on my own show. But anyway, again, thanks for listening. We'll check back on another episode of GDIY here soon. Thanks.